Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hilltop. Today we are excited to be joined by Mike Massa, longtime faculty member and coach here at Chaminade, also an alum, so we're looking forward to hearing a lot about his life and his time here at Chaminade. So Mike, thanks for joining us and for being here. So first of all, we're here in 2024 at the end of the school year. How many years is this that you've been back teaching at Chaminade?
So I started in January of 1988, so I just finished I believe it's my 37th and a half year.
And a half.
Most teachers don't have half.
Exactly, so hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about that half as we go on talking. But so congratulations on such a long tenure and more to come hopefully. So let's start though at the beginning. Are you a lifelong St. Louisan? Can you give us a little bit more about kind of your upbringing and where you went to grade school and that kind of stuff?
Sure, I am a lifelong St. Louisan. I grew up in the city of St. Louis. When I say the city, it's kind of funny to me because I think we lived on the westernmost street in the St. Louis city. I believe that if you just go maybe 100 feet off of the street that I grew up on, it's actually Richmond Heights. And actually if you go probably a couple hundred feet north of where I grew up, you're into Clayton. So Cheshire Inn, High Point Theater area, was where I grew up. I went to St. Luke's, the Evangelist grade school, and then came here as a ninth grader, and from here went to St. Mary's. Really, when I started here as a ninth grader, that was kind of the beginning of my immersion into the Marianist.
Sure.
I do have an uncle, or did, my uncle passed away, who was a brother of Mary, and Brother Robert Massa, and he taught here when I was a student here, as well as he was still teaching here when I came back and started teaching. So that impacted myself and some of my siblings. These are some of the questions you might have asked anyway, but I have two older brothers and a younger brother who also graduated from Chaminade, one in '79, one in 1982. I was an '83 grad. My brother Robert was an '84 grad. My youngest brother started here, did not end up finishing here. So there's been a lot of Massa involvement or association with Chaminade.
Sure. So what was young Mike like? What were you into in grade school and in the neighborhood, and what were your hobbies, interests?
Yeah, so I was pretty athletic when I grew up. I would say that my grade school athleticism or athletic career was pretty good. I played soccer, basketball, and baseball. Was a decent enough athlete to where I did pretty well at all of those. When I actually came to Chaminade, it was kind of a jolt, I guess, to my confidence, I think, as much as anything else. I got hurt during my freshman year trying out for soccer. Pulled a groin muscle that ended up kind of pulling away a little bit of the bone, a little bit more significant of a groin injury. And that was not necessarily something that I think helped me from the standpoint. I was pretty introverted, still am actually. And so I think had I been able to have some success early, it would have been a good boost to my confidence. I was not the most self-confident person in the world. And so I ended up playing soccer here for a couple of years. Tried out for baseball a couple different times. Actually was cut as a sophomore and made it as a senior, but was told you're not going to play much. And then I decided I needed to work to raise some money, so I chose to work instead. Played basketball for 4 years, as height disadvantaged as I am. But those experiences, probably more so than anything else, have helped me as a coach because none of them were exceptionally successful. And so I get what it's like to be cut. I get what it's like to sit on a bench and watch other people play. I mean, I played as part of the basketball team. I played as part of the soccer team when I was participating, but not to the extent where I would say I was Hall of Fame material or anything like that. And I guess one interesting aspect of it is that when I ended up going to St. Mary's University upon graduating from here, I eventually ended up playing 4 years of soccer down there. It was an NAI program at the time, but I think part of my experiences here allowed me to kind of get back to a point where I had some confidence in terms of who I was and what I did. And I had a pretty good run down there, and it certainly added to my experience down there, and I'm very appreciative of that.
So tell us a little bit more about what these programs were like, soccer, basketball, and baseball, when you were here as a student, in terms of who were some of the coaches, what was the level of play in terms of our sort of competition and how we competed in that day.
So our soccer, my class, 83, 82, a little bit too, and 84 and 85. So that little era was actually pretty strong in soccer. We were pretty good. At the time, Aquinas was still a school back then, and Aquinas was very good.
My alma mater. So,
yeah. And they were always good in soccer. I mean, they were known for soccer.
Yeah.
And I think my senior year, again, I wasn't necessarily playing, but my senior year, I want to say we finished top 8 maybe. I mean, we made it pretty far. I think we lost to Aquinas. I want to say it was Aquinas. I don't know for sure. I'm old now. My memory's getting worse. But the soccer program was pretty good. Jim Gerker was the coach. Mm-hmm. And quite honestly, I hope Jim doesn't watch this or listen to this. I had Jim as a teacher twice in English. And I was a little bit intimidated by Jim. I think that was part of my fault, but my situation in terms of why I didn't play 4 years of soccer here. And in hindsight, I'm sure there are some people that are going to say I could be a pretty intimidating guy as well.
Sure.
I want to say I wish I would have stuck with it, because I think I would have added to what we did. But at the same time, I think it was a necessary step in my life that actually allowed me to then come back to soccer when I got down to St. Mary's, because there was a clear missing of it. And when I got down there and got involved with some of the guys that were on the team, for whatever reason, again, that confidence kind of came back, and I thought, well, I can do this. I can play with these guys.
Okay.
Baseball-wise, we were okay as well. Basketball-wise, it's nothing like what it is now. I can tell you that in 4 years of playing basketball here at the high school level, I don't believe I saw one dunk at any time, even on the varsity level.
Sure.
Now, you see more dunks in warm-ups than I saw in my entire. And to be fair, even in general, I think it's a different game now than it was then. But we've definitely elevated the level of play here, and most of the guys that are from my era, I think, are aware of that. There are some guys that I think that played during the 80s that could play now, but certainly the level of play has been, I mean, starting in the early 90s has done nothing but go up and stay up.
Right.
So a little bit different of a
So we talked a lot about you as an athlete so far. What else were you involved in while you were here at school? And
not a ton, quite honestly. There weren't a lot of student athletes that came from St. Luke's that came here. That was a difficult transition for me. Most of the guys at the time, CBC was right down the street. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was in Clayton.
Right.
The majority of people from St. Luke's went to CBC, especially if you played soccer. I mean, it was a pretty easy transition. I even was thinking about it from a cost standpoint, because my uncle was a brother of Mary. I think my parents were able to get. There was a fund that the brothers put money into, since they didn't have kids, that could be used towards nephews.
Right.
I think that helped us out a little bit. I was a little bit, I believe at least, a fish out of water a little bit, from the standpoint of, again, most of the feeder schools, even still, you still don't tend to get a lot of, I guess, St. Gabe's we do, and maybe a few kids from St. Ambrose and stuff like that, but the majority of our guys come from West County. So it took me a while. I can honestly say that I don't even know until it was maybe halfway through my junior year where I really started to see some semblance of joy or getting something out of my time here at Chaminade. Had nothing really to do with the teachers or the courses. I was a good student. It was just hard for me, and I still think to some degree when guys come in as new ninth graders because of the middle school, and you already have pre-established friend groups and so forth, playing athletics will usually help that. Getting hurt, within the first month of my freshman year, probably created an obstacle that was already going to be a challenge for me that became especially challenging for me.
And was it still the case that in those days approximately that the vast majority of people had been here in middle school and that a smaller percentage added at ninth grade?
Correct. And even with my brothers coming here before, my oldest brother was very athletic, very similar to me. My brother Stephen was not necessarily that way. I think had Stephen been like Todd, I think it would have I would have kind of followed in that suit, but because we were all kind of a little bit different, it was. But I think, I don't want to speak for my brothers, but I think it was a challenge for them as well, coming from a school where when you come out here, you might know a handful of people at best, and but even today, that's still a challenge, and it's something. Most of my experiences as a student here have helped me in my approach towards students as well. Like, I easily recognize quiet kids that might need a little bit of a push to get involved in stuff, and knowing the significance of getting involved and how that's going to add to their experience here. I had a ton of really good people, and to say I wish one of them would have pushed me a little bit more, because I do. I think Chaminade might have benefited from my abilities a little bit more if somebody would have said, hey, come along for the ride. But ultimately that's my responsibility. But as a teacher and a coach now, I think that certainly has served as something that I try to pull out of some kids that are like myself.
Awesome. So you mentioned Jim Garker. Who were some of the other kind of big personalities here at the time that maybe did have an impact on you, or just the names that we should know?
Wayne McKim easily by far, and anybody who was here during that era tremendously influenced me as a student athlete. He was a history teacher, junior American history teacher, and I'll never forget. My oldest brother in particular and Wayne had established a pretty good relationship, so I knew of Wayne even when I was in 7th and 8th grade, just because my brother Todd played basketball and Wayne was a basketball coach. And when I walked into so I was playing for him as well my junior year. I was playing basketball, and when I walked into his class, it was very much a Socratic way of teaching, and he did not necessarily wait for you to raise your hand to call on you, and especially for people that he knew and that he was kind of trying to push and prod and pull some stuff out of. So I'm a very competitive person. There are very few things that I don't really want to do well and don't push myself to do well at. And so it didn't take long for me to realize he wasn't going to wait until I raised my hand to answer a question, that I had to be prepared to answer questions. And I did. I very much spent a lot of time trying to make sure I was good, especially in that class. And so his approach kind of has always kind of stuck with me. I feel like to some degree I owe some of what I do to what the way in which he went about doing his thing. Bob Johnson was another longtime English teacher here.
That's a name that hasn't come up yet in our conversation. So talk to us a little bit more about Bob.
One of the more good, sarcastic teachers that I think I ever had. Very, very dry, very wry sense of humor, but also very committed to the school, and a tremendous English and grammar teacher. He and Wayne both I mean, this kind of extends beyond my student time here, but I came back towards the end of my college career, right before I got hired here to teach and actually started to work at Camp Chaminade. I actually worked the last 7 years of Camp Chaminade as a counselor. And at the very beginning, when I got hired to do that, I got to know Bob and Wayne even more so because they were running the camp. Wayne was the director and Bob was his second in command. And so again, if you talk to the people who graduated in the 80s, certainly Bob was a quirky yet really good guy. He ran the newspaper, and every year there'd be a newspaper article with quotes from Bob that now would be a little different given the time has changed a little bit, but that's the impact that he had. And you talk to grads in the 80s, and they're going to remember Bob. Single guy. Wayne was a single guy. I'm a single guy. So again, I don't know how much that influenced me. I mean, I actually kind of remember giving Wayne trouble when I helped him in the dorms when he was running the dorms about on his days off, going home when he needed to. And now there's a lot of times when people tell me, you need to go home. You don't need to be. I mean, again, you don't know at the time how much you're going to be impacted by these people. But certainly those two in particular, I mean, Jim Gerker, Mike Francis, Kevin Brennan, a lot of people that I came back with and had the good fortune of working alongside.
Right.
I was telling yesterday one of the guys that went to school with me whose son graduated that I have always felt that despite even my uncertainty the first couple of years here as a student, there were always people here who impacted me in terms of, from the standpoint of how hard they worked, how much they challenged me, to where I feel like part of what I'm still doing, and even more so now the older I've gotten, is to make sure that I'm giving back and I'm leaving this place in the same fashion that it was when I was a student here. Times have changed. That's clearly a much different aura, so to speak, or culture. But the objective of making sure that I give back, or I try to be a positive influence or a role model for some of these guys, as many of these guys as I can. I feel like that was done for me as well.
So I want to go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, even the brothers and the priests that were here, who I don't think I appreciated as much when I was here as a student, as I do now when I've come back and worked alongside of them. Father Mollering, for example, was a teacher here. He taught junior religion and showed a lot of movies. We used to refer to him as Father Warenberg. And then I came back and started working during the summer here at Camp Chaminade and saw him day after day after day out in the July and August heat, working to plant flowers and do stuff. You get a whole different perspective when you come back. I mean, I know there's been a lot of us who've come back as former students and taught here. You get a whole different perspective when you're working alongside people than when you were a student and you watched them from that side.
We'll get more into that in just a minute. I wanted to follow up though on what you were saying about sort of different era and how things are different. Obviously we can look at, say, the physical campus and some obvious things like laptops and all that kind of stuff. But what sort of beyond maybe some of those things, if you could dig a little deeper into is the student the same? Is the Chaminade student in 2024 the same as you were in 1983? Is the culture the same? And overall, how are those things shifted, or have they?
I would say more or less yes. I mean, I think kids are kids, 17-year-olds are 17-year-olds. I do think the culture has changed, but I think, we didn't have cell phones back then. Right, wrong, or indifferent, you cannot say that social media or the access to that, just what kids do on a day-to-day basis and where they spend their time and how they spend their time, it is different. Now, I'm sure somebody would say in the 1960s to the 1980s that it was the same thing. So there's always, differences, but I think there's a lot of similarities as well. Probably the biggest change, I think, is, quite frankly, and I don't know if anybody else has shared this, but back in the day, the physical aspect of how teachers maybe dealt with students, whether it was a brother turning his ring around and slapping you on top of the head, or just the methodology to what you could do or can't do. I would never be in support of physically, challenging a student, but at the same time, you found out pretty quickly when you weren't doing. Same way though, growing up with older brothers. I mean, you found out that, and not that doesn't happen today, but there's a different view on if that happens today than was happening back then. So, I do believe that the purpose of this school has not changed. The way that we go about perhaps teaching accountability has become more of a challenge, just because I think society has made that more difficult.
The world as a whole, too.
Yeah.
So, leaving Chaminade, you stay in the Marianist family, as you said, going to St. Mary's and another Marianist school. Was that intentional in terms of that Marianist track? Is it just, hey, that was the best fit for you? What brought you to St. Mary's?
Well, it's funny because I talked about this with a grad yesterday as well. I don't know that I really got into the college selection process like kids do now. I had applied to Marquette University and got accepted. I knew that I was going to be responsible for paying for college myself. So how much it cost was a factor. That's part of the reason why I think I even stopped playing sports, specifically baseball, and to some degree soccer, because I had to work. I needed to get some money. I worked at Schnucks at the time and had a friend group through them. So it helped me in my teenage years as well enjoy life in general, and also serve the purpose of giving me money.
Right.
Matt Newworth, he's an '83 grad, went down to St. Mary's University, still a good friend of mine, and I used to share a lunch table together. And we were talking, and this would have been maybe in January, if my memory serves me correctly, because he was talking about a scholarship that is available, and still is available actually, and not always utilized, to if you go to a Marianist high school, you can attend St. Mary's, Chaminade in Hawaii, or Dayton, pretty much for a full ride from the standpoint of academically. And Matt was talking about how he had applied for that scholarship. And to this day, I still joke with him, because I remember hearing that. I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm smarter than Matt. I can get this. Well, again, contextually, you can't get that if you're applying in January. That's something that you would probably have to apply to. And so I didn't get it. But I got my financial aid package and my scholarship package or whatever from St. Mary's was significantly cheaper than what it was going to be to go to Marquette. So I went to St. Mary. I chose to go to St. Mary's sight unseen. I had never been down there. No, and they had like sleeping bag weekend stuff back then too, like they still do now, but really had there was definitely no, this is a Marianist school, I want to go to another Marianist school. It was more, hey, this is a school that I think from an affordability standpoint is going to be good. And I also think I like the fact that it's a relatively small school. I think that aspect of it served me quite well. I very clearly remember, I hope my brother Todd is embarrassed by this if he ever listens to this, that the very first, in August when we went down, I did not play soccer down there my freshman year. I did not realize that was even going to be an option for me or a desire for me. And so my mom and my dad, and I think my oldest brother Todd, went down there with us. Dropped me off again, first time I'd ever seen the campus and so forth, and I remember my brother Todd kind of giving me trouble as he left about how I would now be in my room by myself for the rest of, and so
nice older brother.
Correct, as older brothers are. It was definitely something that I needed to go through. That my experience, 4.5 years, because I didn't play soccer as a freshman, started to play as my sophomore year, played sophomore year, junior year, was a captain both my real senior year and then that extra semester. I really do believe that I kind of came out of my shell and grew up when I was at St. Mary's, and it was a perfect place to do it, because just like Chaminade, a lot of positive influences by teachers, priests, brothers, and even more so, the people that I was able to go to school with, play soccer with, join a fraternity with, I was extremely blessed. I mean, from the standpoint of really not putting a lot of energy or intentionalness into my college selection, I really lucked out. Not that it was lucky that I ended up at St. Mary's, but lucky that I was surrounded by so many good people, which is generally the case at a Marianist university, just like it's generally the case at a Marianist high school. The purpose that keeps me here, that drives me to do what I do, was the same back then. And I have lifelong friendships now that I would guess I would have developed some lifelong friendships at other schools as well. But it was just a good fit. I think as I will discuss momentarily how I got my job here, right. I think there was intervention on the Lord's part, perhaps, in terms of His grace, in terms of maybe my decision making at that time.
Yeah, so let's get into this half a year. It sounds like that's the lead into the half year. You stayed an extra semester to play soccer, one final semester?
So I stayed an extra semester, so 4.5 years. And at the time, in that fall semester, I had to decide, so what am I going to do next? My oldest brother, who I'm very close with again, was a lawyer, and I thought, well, you know, that seems interesting to me. I had applied, taken the LSAT, and was considering where I was going to apply for law school. I was very much enjoying my college experience still, loved intramurals. I mean, you want to challenge me to cards, tiddlywinks, whatever. I enjoy competition, and I enjoy the friendships and the camaraderie that occurs during that stuff. So I was trying to figure out what I would do with the second semester. If I was going to go to law school, I wasn't going to do it until the following fall. And there was actually an opening for an RA position down there for the second semester.
Because what was your major? What did you major in?
Finance.
Finance, gotcha.
And I applied for that opening thinking, okay, again, I'm having to pay for this, but if they can pay for my room and board, and I don't know if this is true or just poor memory, that you may, if you were an RA, you may have even gotten 3 hours or 6 hours credit at something. I would have just taken something to keep me busy. And that's huge because I made it to the final 3. I remember that. And I think probably St. Mary's saw through my plan a little bit and wanted somebody that was more not just hanging out down there. And so I wasn't chosen. And that's hugely important because without a doubt, I may not be sitting here in front of you now because I would not have, if they had told me that I was the choice, then what eventually happened would have been very different because I was not the choice. I came back to St. Louis. Actually, within the week of when I got back in December, I went to a basketball game. I don't know if it was the Chaminade Christmas tournament or maybe the week prior to that, but I know very clearly that I came to a Chaminade basketball game because of having played, to see Wayne McKim, the basketball coach, to say hi. The summer before, I had started working Camp Chaminade. So before my final semester at St. Mary's, I had my first year working at Camp Chaminade. And so I was working with Wayne, I was working with Bob Johnson, and I also met Brother Max or Mark Baer, who was the principal at the time. He was not the principal when I was a student here. So he would not have known me from Adam had I not been up there during the summer. And I think he kind of saw the way that I kind of counseled with the kids and my ability to work with kids during the camp. So at halftime of the basketball game, I went up into the Commons. I can remember it like it was yesterday, and I was just watching them kind of warm up in between first and second half. And Brother Max came up to the side of me and he said, "Hey Mike, how did your semester go?" I said, "It went pretty well." He said, "Didn't you just graduate?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What's your degree?" And I said, "Finance or financial management." And without a second's break, he said, "How would you like to teach 5 business classes?" And I said, "Excuse me?" There was a brother, I believe a brother who may have been at the college level for some time, who had been, brought back here, who maybe wasn't a good fit. I do remember the very first day. It was in room 405. I've been on the 4th floor since I've been teaching here, but I remember seeing jelly stains from a jelly donut that were near the door that perhaps didn't get there by accident.
Right.
So in any case, I was given a week to think about it. As a matter of fact, the grad father who I talked to yesterday, whose son graduated, reminded me that apparently in that first semester, certainly, if not that first year and a half, I had told kids that this was just going to be a short-time thing. I was going to become a lawyer. I was going to go to law school.
Gotcha.
So it clearly was still kind of, I mean, I hope this doesn't get me in trouble. I'm still not certified to teach after 37 and a half years. I did go back. I went to all the methods classes at UMSL. They were going to require me to do my student teaching somewhere else. And by the time I had gotten to that point, I had been here for a handful of years. And I said, well, how am I going to do that? And so it just never worked. I would certainly hope from a state standpoint, accreditation-wise,
Right.
that 37 and a half years would qualify.
I think you're good.
As student teaching. But it was, again, I would, without a doubt, had said no had St. Mary's told me. I would not have wanted to leave St. Mary's kind of high and dry. And I think, again, this was kind of the Lord's way of saying, this might be your gig. And
So what was it like, literally a couple weeks at the most, a few weeks, maybe a month at the very most, after you got randomly offered this job and standing in the Commons to be now standing before a bunch of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old guys?
The first day was easy. I clearly remember that. I clearly remember. And it was basically a week and a half after I had been proposed this. And it was easy simply because I didn't have to do anything other than introduce myself and just kind of get a feel. I very clearly remember growing a beard because I was 22 and they were 18. And I thought, there's got to be a recognizable difference here. And it was probably not a very good beard either, but to me, it was a significant beard to show
Something.
I'm a teacher, I'm
Right.
not one of you. The second day, I can honestly say this. I've had days where I maybe haven't felt like teaching much just because of circumstances. But the second day, I remember it was an economics class. So I was teaching economics, accounting, and business law. Many of the classes that I either still teach or have been associated with for several years. And I remember the very first class of the day, and I think it was an economics class, me saying, okay, we're going to get going, and turning around and looking at the chalkboard, because on those days we had chalkboard back then, and just for a brief moment, just completely not knowing what I was going to say next, and thinking to myself, what are you going to talk about? And then I don't even know what I did, but after that, kind of things just flowed. And again, 37 and a half years later, I'm still kind of doing.
Maybe a little too much into the weeds, but were you provided a book? Did someone say, here's the curriculum? Did you just like, here's the book, go? How much sort of training did you get in that week and a half?
There was no training. There was no training in the week and a half. I did get a book. I was told where we had left off, where they had left off. And then it just kind of became, I'm still kind of as a teacher, having a textbook fan as being the guiding force, so to speak, especially with the classes that I teach. There's not a lot of creativity associated with I mean, there's Excel, there are different ways of doing it now as opposed to doing it by hand. And back then, of course, there was no online anything.
Right.
So having the textbook just meant I was tied to the textbook, and I'm basically teaching very similar, if not the exact same concepts that I teach now. It's just the methodology now is quite a bit more expansive because of internet access and digital textbooks and digital resources. But yeah,
You were staying a day ahead of the students.
Exactly. Probably to a T, I was probably staying a day ahead of the students. And can't really remember much about it at all, quite frankly. I mean, it was a blur to me. I would honestly tell you that probably the first 5 years that I taught, because I didn't do anything else. I came straight from high school to college to teaching, that it was hard for me to see it as a job. Not because I wasn't working, but because I was 22. I was in an environment that 4.5 years ago, I was in as well. I was on a different side, but it was school. You know, I still had summers off. I was coaching sports, so I was involved with, you know, soccer. I mean, I got hired in January, and the first thing I did was start coaching middle school basketball. And some of the young men that I coached back then are some of my good friends now, and we laugh about Mike Massa as a 22-year-old teacher and coach thinking he was about to win the NCAA tournament when he's coaching 7th graders or 8th graders. Went from there into baseball, and then the next year, soccer, basketball, baseball. And so for 27 years or so, I did all three. So I was immediately immersed in the place, and it was still very similar to me. You know, for those of us who have done this for a long time, you kind of go through eras. I remember when I was in my 20s and kids thought I was cool, and because I was closer to their age, right? And then moving through my 30s and 40s and now into my 50s, where I'm not their big brother-ish kind of thing. Now I'm their dad, or God forbid, even grandfather-ish, where it's just different. It's not better, it's not worse. It's just different. Our roles change here as faculty members. When you've been around, I feel like I try to spend a significant amount of time now mentoring teachers as much as I do students. I still am very blessed and very fortunate to be able to establish relationships with kids, and that's always good for me, because I mean, that's why we do what we do. We don't own second homes. We don't, you know, have vacation, you know, we do this because there's merit to what we're doing, and I'm still very blessed and feel very fortunate. But it certainly back then seemed, easy is not the right word, but just
comfortable
to what's new.
Right.
I mean, I've never, I mean, I think I could have been a pretty successful business person. I think I'm savvy enough and
Jack
intelligent enough to do that.
But
But
Jack Mathewson to the main office.
I don't think I'd be as happy. I think I'd be wealthier, but I don't think I'd be as happy knowing that I've got a long list of individuals, parents, kids, whatever, that I've been able to establish and hopefully help them as they grew as young adults to adults, and now I teach alongside several people who I taught. As I said yesterday when I was walking through graduation, the very first person that I talked to said, "Oh, this must be pretty interesting for you, getting a picture taken with my arm around a current grad and his father, who I taught back in 1989, 1990. And I said to him, "No, you're probably one of about 6 to 12 of these pictures that I might have today." I'm okay with that. That certainly is something that is rewarding. At the same time, it can be challenging as well.
You mentioned earlier that in the early days of your teaching, the plan was still probably, hey, this is temporary, I'm going to go back to law school. Was there ever a time when you sort of said, hey, I'm going to stick this out, or did it just become, that's what you did? Did that just sort of, that thought fade away?
No. Well, yeah, the thought faded away. I think by probably year 2, year 3, I was pretty committed to what I was doing. I mean, it's just, when I think back, it was such a different time, though. I mean, back then, for example, we had a faculty lounge where all the faculty kind of went during their breaks. And being a young guy here, being surrounded by a bunch of old timers and several guys that had taught in public schools who came to private schools kind of as a semi-retirement thing. And to listen to these guys talk, even some of the guys who had been teaching here when I was a student here, seeing that different side of them. When you asked before who influenced me, I have been unbelievably blessed to work with coaches and older people at the time who I listened a lot more than I talked, and Marty Mahalski and Leroy Angert, and even Mike Gavain. He's not a lot older than me, but as a soccer coach, I had a lot to learn, and just allowing myself to be impacted by mentors. I mean, in the leadership class that I teach now, I talk a lot about finding a mentor, finding somebody. I mean, we have a house system with mentors in it, but it goes much more beyond that in terms of finding somebody who's giving you valuable, or who at least potentially can give you valuable life lessons and information, and allowing yourself to kind of listen to that. But I never fully went back. The only time I can honestly tell you that I questioned kind of what I did or do was during the pandemic. When I'm sure a lot of teachers my age at the time probably got out, quite honestly. I believe that we handled the pandemic quite well here as a school, but I can tell you that if I would have had to do what was required of us to do for a second year, I don't know that I would have done it. The fact that I'm single and I'm very much like my father and very frugal, I could have stepped away and survived. And it's the only time I really thought to myself, maybe it's time to do something different, because education at that time was just really hard.
Right, tough.
And the relationship building was
gone.
Or
at least greatly reduced, at
much
least.
more difficult.
Exactly. So you've mentioned it a couple times. Just wanted to dig in a little bit more to Camp Chaminade. Certainly it was a big part of your early years here. And for those of listeners, viewers who may not be as familiar with it, can you just give us a little bit of a background and why it's such a kind of a legendary thing around here, around Chaminade?
So now teaching the Estelvier leadership class, I even know more about the history of it. It was started back in the 1930s in large part because of the Depression and because of the fact that the school was really having a hard time finding students. It was started as a recruitment, a way to recruit kids, which when you think about it, I mean, at the time we had an outdoor pool. I mean, the outdoor pool was built from the inception of this place. And knowing that we have had resident students here since the start of the school, you have a residence, you have a place to stay, why not utilize it during the summer? So it had been done for years and years and years. My oldest brother Todd had started to work it with Wayne McKim. It seemed like a much more, again, I think deep down inside I realized that there was a calling for me, or maybe I didn't realize there was a calling but wanted to do it, because you're hanging out with kids, doing athletic stuff, whatever. Wayne would never hire Todd and myself at the same time. I don't think Wayne wanted us to give attention to each other. I think he wanted us to give attention to him. I think people who know Wayne might chuckle at that, but understand that. So Todd stopped working the camp, and I immediately started working it. And it was, to me, a tremendous aspect of this place. I think I worked it for 7 years, and I think it closed right around 94, 95. And it was just a neat experience to be able to say in the middle of St. Louis, West St. Louis County, we had horses. We would ride horseback. We shot guns, single shot 22 caliber rifles. Bob Johnson was the guy who ran the riflery station, and you didn't screw around. Kids to this day will walk on the west side of at the end of the swimming pool, where the athletic is, and you can see bullet marks from kids who decided they weren't going to shoot at the target. It was the last time they shot during the week, if that happened. As you can imagine, the safety.
Amen.
I mean, behind Canning, we built a haystack, and we did archery. Again, we swam outside, which to me in the middle of the summer, July when it's hot here, no air conditioning, zero air conditioning in that place, which still amazes me to this day. But, at night we were tired and had big floor hall fans, and it cooled down enough to where you got through it. The parents dropped off their kids on Sunday afternoons, and they stayed all the way through till Saturdays. Doing when I first started, I was in charge of what were called patrols at the time. There were 4 patrols. 1 was the youngest kids, usually 8 to 9 years old. 4 was usually kids that were, I guess, maybe 13, 14, about to enter. Again, it was a recruitment thing as much as anything else. You went through the day doing various activities, arts and crafts, swimming, archery, riflery, sports, whatever. I think an amusing story, I guess, perchance, I find it amusing, is 3 times a week, we used to bring all the camp together to do bombardment. Super bombardment, I think is what it was called. We did it on Sunday, the very first night that they got here. And it was a relatively tame situation. You know, kids didn't know each other yet, didn't know the counselors didn't know the kids. And then on Wednesday, we had a super bombardment as well. And again, especially as I became a faculty member here and my role changed a little bit. I became kind of the guy in charge on the spot. Wayne was still running the camp, but Wayne was oftentimes doing administrative things where the day-to-day stuff, the hour, minute stuff was me. It became noticeable to me that it was more spirited, let's put it that way. The counselors were primarily high school kids or college kids. And so if kids were giving them issues during the week, perhaps they were being targeted.
This is their chance to.
And the last time we played Super Bombardment was on Saturday afternoon, right before they went home.
Right.
And that's where I discovered I've got to be careful with this because now this is it.
Right.
They're going home. And every once in a while, you know, I used to have to encourage a college student or a high school kid that was helping out. We probably don't want to throw at their head or anything like that. And again, it was a tremendous experience. To this day, I still am in contact with usually graduates who started here, went to Camp Chaminade, came through high school here.
Awesome.
Some of whom even came back and acted as counselors. It was a great experience. I know we've restarted it.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my difficulty, or I don't know if that's the right word, but challenge in getting back involved in it is I still have kind of the memories of what it was, and we can't.
It's a different thing, yeah.
Correct.
I mean, right.
It's a different time.
Different time.
We don't
the
even
facilities
have the
are
facilities
different, right?
to do
Exactly.
What it is
So
that
yeah,
we did, and I kind of like that memory.
Right.
As it is. Not that
That's
the
great.
memory now isn't going to be
Sure.
good as well. It's just different.
Yeah, amen. So one of the other things, especially in recent years, that I know you've gotten very involved with on campus is MLC. Do you want to talk a little bit about how your involvement there got started and what you find valuable in that? I'm sure it's a lot of the same things you've been mentioning in terms of relationship building and mentoring and that sort of thing. Yeah.
So mid 1910s, around 2000, sorry, 15-ish, I guess. My coaching responsibilities changed a little bit, going through a transition in terms of what I was asked to do, what I wanted to do, whatever. Just a change where I wasn't going to coach as much as I had before. I had started to kind of attend MLC just because I thought it was kind of an interesting thing. I don't really remember if we had it. If we did have it when I was a student here, I think we did. I think it was called CLC, Christian Life Community at the time. I think Wayne was probably involved in it as well. I didn't really get involved in it back then, but I remember it being here and being a part of what we did. So again, fast forward to 2015-ish, because I still was seeking the ability to establish relationships with kids and build relationships with kids, and the coaching aspect wasn't there as much anymore. I kind of gravitated towards that. It would be another instance where I think the Lord was kind of involved with, you might see this as this door shutting from a coaching standpoint, but there's this door opening up. I look back on it now and I think, what a tremendous opportunity it was for me because of some of the people that I have met, just the faith building and the community building and the relationship building that occurs through MLC. I've attended Life Camp or Life Week now, which is the kind of the retreat on steroids that the kids who become core members or leaders go through. Chris Shaver and I have been able to attend Life Week out in Pacific, which is a wonderful place to go. In the middle of June, when it's nice and hot and humid here, we're kind of on a mountainside in the middle of the redwoods, sometimes wearing sweats and hooded sweatshirts all week as the temperature might not even get out of the 70s. But looking forward to it again. I don't know how many years we've done it now. It's been several, close to 10. Looking forward to doing that, and very much enjoy the opportunity to work. We're working with 12 young men. They're going to come out with us, this June. They're going to do a prayer service, so we've already started the process of now working with them. But yeah, it's a MLC. I tell my leadership classes, Father Chaminade was a big believer in sodalities, was a big believer in lay Marianists or lay people being a huge part. As a matter of fact, he established his connection with lay people before he even did with the Daughters of Mary Immaculate or the Society of Mary. And so he always recognized the significance of lay communities, and that's what MLC is. There were sodalities here, as a matter of fact, as part of activities all the way through the 1960s. They were eventually phased out simply because they weren't as popular in the 60s as they had been historically through the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Now I tell guys that we don't have a sodality per se, but MLC is essentially the same thing as a sodality. We have the same intent in mind: venerate and honor Mary, develop faith. Most of our guys, when you ask them one of the reasons why they want to do it as core leaders, is because they say they want to develop their faith and leadership at the same time. Well, again, two things that I think are vital for us to develop here as a Catholic school.
Amen.
Faith and leadership.
Amen. So before we wrap up here, just got a couple more quick things. What does Mike Massa do outside of school? You're obviously identified with Chaminade. What are some of your hobbies? What are some of your fun? What is your creativity outside of the walls of this campus?
Yeah, well, since the pandemic, pickleball has become a pretty big passion of mine. Was blessed this year to even work with some of our kids who have kind of gone into that sport as well. As I mentioned earlier, it was a difficult year. The pandemic was very hard, and thankfully, I believe we had a fairly easy, or I don't know what the word I'm looking for, winter. It wasn't a bad winter, so I was able to go outside a lot, which, as you can imagine, wearing a mask all day and going through those day in, day out stuff, it was just nice to get outside, get a mask off, and enjoy myself. And again, I've always been an athlete, always been a competitive person. It blended in well. So that's the biggest thing. I've always enjoyed fishing. I haven't had as many opportunities now as I did. Thankfully, Coach Gavain, he and his family have a place down at Bull Shoals that I used to frequent a lot to rest and relax. It was always nice when I was able to get down there to not have to be into the world of Chaminade or St. Louis. I mean, I was able to separate and relax quite a bit, and still very much enjoy and look for opportunities to do that. My family has really probably been cheated out of my time to some degree. I have 5 siblings, 12 or 13 nieces and nephews, some great nieces and nephews now. My time at Chaminade oftentimes has preceded some of my time spent with my family, although I'm still very much a family-oriented person, always kind of have been. Not a hugely social person, like going out and spending. I'm a hole-in-the-wall type guy, as opposed to a let's go and get dressed up kind of a thing. So, still try to find, probably more so now that I'm getting older and energy level fades a little bit, value and make myself stay away a little bit more. Been blessed to work with a lot of young faculty here, Chris Shaver and some of the other guys who have come through who have that same kind of vitality towards the place, and so they still keep me active, but certainly have moved into the how am I going to make my exit part of my life here at Chaminade, and not necessarily looking to do that in a year or two, but knowing that I'm closer to that than
Sure.
I am the beginning or the
Sure.
middle of this, which
Sure.
again is it's a part of the process. I have a lot of respect, a ton of respect for the guys and gals who did this for as long as they did this. It's not an easy job, not Chaminade per se, but just teaching in general.
Of course.
And especially being in the classroom the whole time, not moving to a different position. When you move to an administrative position, you know, it kind of breathes new life. It's a little bit different. But when you're on the front lines, that can be a challenge as you go through different generations, because like I said earlier, you know, I was cool when I was in my 20s saying some of the same things I say now, but I'm a different deliverer of the message, so to speak. And it's not always bad, it's just different.
Was that ever of interest to you to move into administration or even athletic director kind of role or anything like that, or was just never happen? Or
it never happened. Certainly as an athletic director's role, I still think I would be pretty good at, probably better now than I may have been even when I was thinking about it back when I was younger, given the number of sports that I've coached and the trials and tribulations that come along with that. Administration, not so much. I think some students might be haunted by this thought that I would probably make a pretty good disciplinarian.
Sure.
I feel as though that my classes and my teams and whatever, their structure, I believe very highly in the need for structure. I think our kids might tell you, our young men might tell you that they don't want it. I think that's a lie. I think most young men crave it and need it and thrive in it. So yeah, I think I think that I could. I just think it takes you away to some degree from the relationship building, which I think has kind of been vital to what I do. And so I've thought about it, but I don't know that I've ever seriously considered doing it. If Chaminade really needed it, and they came and said, "Hey, we need your help," I would probably consider it. Although maybe not at this point.
That's
I
all
mean,
right.
again, it's just a different time
Sure.
now.
Right.
So.
Well, that just brings us to our last question that I always ask to everybody as the final question is reflecting on our school motto of Estovere, be a man. You obviously have the unique perspective of been on the student side, the Camp Chaminade side, now obviously many years in the classroom. What does Estovere mean to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a part of me that believes it's an overused term. And I say that only because to me, to be a man, brotherhood, which is oftentimes used in association with that, as a house system now, or as CMEs, we have family spirit. I think it entails more than just on paper to be a man. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I challenge the guys sometimes about brotherhood. Yeah, brotherhood is nice when you're standing in the crowd yelling taunts and stuff at opposing teams. But brotherhood to me also means, what are you doing when this person needs you, when it's not so much fun? I mean, are you stepping in, for example, when somebody's making decisions that they shouldn't be making, whether it be in a lunchroom, whether it be at mass, whether it be whenever, and say, hey, you really shouldn't do that, because that's not what we do. I have been very blessed, again, in terms of the number of things that I have done and been involved with. MLC, coaching, the El Salvador service trip. Just the house system when it first started, being a dean, in terms of the opportunities that it presents for us to nurture and develop the inherent abilities that our guys have. It's not always fun along the way. There's trials and tribulations, but the process, to me, is part of what Estovere is to me, because when we're in El Salvador and we're serving the needs of the poor, the kids are waking up in the mornings earlier than they want to. going to do physical labor to build something on behalf of somebody else, to then go to lunch and spend time with young El Salvadorian kids, frolicking and playing and so forth, to then go to dinner, to then maybe visit some places where Archbishop Romero, Saint Romero had been. I mean, I've stood at the site where he lost his life. That experience, that opportunity to do that with our guys, to me, is transformational to them. Even just like when we do our life weeks and so forth, and in various other aspects. I mean, you ask kids around here, what was your best experiential learning trip? They're going to have difference of opinions on it, but the one thing that's going to be saying, it was an opportunity for us to challenge them as young men, and to hopefully help them along the process of becoming, you know, the phrase that we like to use now is the man that the world needs you to be. I believe in that. I mean, that was a Chaminade grad who actually said that. Father Chris Martin was the first person, I think, to say that at one of our masses, and I very much believe that. And the tremendous number of opportunities and extracurriculars and service projects and all of that we have here is the method to the madness. It's how you get from point A to point B. You have to, just like I would say to you, my social life has suffered because of my commitment to Chaminade. My family life, to some degree, has had to take a back seat. Part of what I have gotten out of Chaminade is because of what I've chosen to put into Chaminade. And I haven't always said the right thing or done the right thing, but they've always had my full commitment and my full intention of trying to help out kids as best as I could. And I would certainly hope more often than not, it's been applause for both sides of the equation, for me individually as well as for them. And certainly I run into alumni all the time now. They remember a lot more than what I remember, but I'm just happy that much more often than not it's a positive experience, and it's something that so again, to go back to that question, to me, that's Estelvir to me. Estelvir to me is seeing Tim Sartori. I remember as a 7th grader. I remember talking to him when he was a junior or a senior, even when he was at SLU trying to get through some of his business classes, helping him do that. I was there the day that his twins were born. I've seen him grow as a father and as a teacher and as a coach, and that's Estelvir to me, to be able to have. That's a unique situation because he's come back and he's a colleague, but I also know hundreds, if not more than that, right, of young men who have come through and they get it. They don't always get it when you want them to get it,
right,
but eventually they get it. And more often than not, when they come back and they let you know that, it makes our jobs a lot more fulfilling.
Sure.
It's not as if we don't know that it's not going to happen, but to see it kind of
Nice
occur.
to hear it and nice to see it.
I mean,
sure.
Like I said, we're not retiring early, and we're not living in the lap of luxury.
Exactly.
So it's nice to know that your commitment and dedication to stuff is paid off.
Well, thank you for your many years of commitment and dedication to Chaminade. And our light's going out one more time for good measure as we wrap up. And well, there's many things we didn't talk about. Thanks for bringing up El Salvador. I'd hope to touch on that. And obviously we didn't talk at all about the house system and your time as a dean and such, but you've given a lot to Chaminade, so thank you for all that. And thank you for listening and watching with us today.